Welcome to the Human Archive. If you enjoy original science fiction stories about humanity finding its place among the stars, subscribe and join us for the next story. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Worker Refused. The first human to stop production at Asterion Orbital Forge possessed no legal authority to do so. Senior Industrial Loss Assessor Severin Call considered that an important detail. The human did not. Don't touch that. The maintenance technician froze with one hand 6 centimeters from the access housing. Around them, Asterion continued to thunder. The forge wrapped around the inner circumference of a manufacturing ring nearly 12 kilometers across. Starship hull sections moved overhead on magnetic cranes. Molten alloy traveled through ivory-colored ceramic conduits thick enough for a human to crawl through. Welding platforms crawled across skeletal ship frames beyond kilometer-wide pressure windows, their arcs flashing blue-white against the black of space. Every few seconds, some enormous machine sent a tremor through the deck. Severin felt each one through his feet. Threnody hearing was mediocre. Their ancestors had evolved among the crystal forests of high mountain valleys where wind screamed constantly through mineral spires and rendered sound unreliable. Vibration mattered more. A Threnody could feel a loose bearing through 20 meters of flooring. A cracked support beam had a texture. An overloaded motor had a rhythm. To Severin, Asterion Orbital Forge was never quiet. It sang through his bones. At the moment, one note was missing. The coolant circulation motor before them had stopped. That was why technician Yara Kell had been summoned. She was Vesari, light-framed, long-limbed, 2 legs, 2 primary arms, 2 smaller stabilizing arms folded beneath her rib cage. Soft black sensory filaments covered her forearms and shoulders, lying flat against her dark gray skin until exposed to a strong electrical field. The filaments had made Vesari famous throughout the Concord as electrical technicians. They could feel energized equipment before most species. Instruments confirmed it. Yara had already opened the maintenance panel. Then Nadia Mercer had told her not to touch anything. Director Oth Veyrun turned. "What is the problem?" The human safety engineer pointed toward the motor. "Where's the isolation?" Oth's 4 heavy arms tightened against his barrel-shaped torso. He was Kalzari, shorter than Nadia but nearly twice her mass. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world under a violent sun, and their bodies looked designed by someone who distrusted delicacy. Charcoal plates covered his skin. His skull was broad. His eyes were small and recessed behind heavy ridges. Every finger looked capable of crushing pipe. "The motor has stopped," Oth said. "I can see that. The control system reports 0 rotation." "Great." Nadia looked toward Yara. "Can it restart?" Yara's facial membranes shifted, automatically. "Yes. 3 restart sequences are enabled." Nadia looked back at Oth. "Then it isn't isolated." Oth's expression did not change. "The system is in fault. And if the fault clears, the controller attempts restart." So she's about to put her hand inside a machine that can decide to start moving again. The technician knows the restart sequence. Nadia looked toward Yara. "How?" Yara pointed toward 3 small indicator lights above the housing. "If the first turns violet, the system is preparing a pressure check. If the second follows within 4 seconds, the drive may engage. And if you're looking inside the housing, I am trained to remain aware of the indicators." Nadia's face went still. Severin noticed. Humans possessed many expressions, most were unnecessarily subtle. He had known Nadia Mercer for 3 days and had already learned to distrust the absence of one. "Lock it out," she said. Oth blinked. "Explain." "Physically prevent it from being energized. The control system can disable power." "Who can re-enable it?" "Any authorized control supervisor." "From where?" "Any supervisory terminal." Nadia looked across the forge. There were hundreds. "Can they see Yara from those terminals?" "No." "Can the computer guarantee they know she's inside the motor?" "Technicians register maintenance work before beginning." Nadia looked at Yara. "Did you?" "Yes." "Can a supervisor override it?" Yara hesitated. "Yes." Nadia stared at Oth. Oth's lower arms flexed. "This procedure has been performed thousands of times." "That wasn't the question." "It is performed safely." How many times has this motor been serviced? Yara answered, 46. How many technicians? 12. Any injuries? Oth said, 2 minor. Nadia turned toward him. What happened? One technician suffered a fractured manipulator during an unexpected restart 9 years ago. Severin knew the case. He had reviewed the compensation, ruling himself. The technician had failed to maintain visual observation of the restart indicators. Responsibility had been assigned accordingly. Nadia looked at him. You investigated that? Yes. What did you change? The worker was retrained. No, the machine. Severin's crestless head tilted slightly. The machine did not violate procedure. Nadia stared at him, that expression again. No expression. She looked back toward Yara. Step away. Yara did not move, Oth said. Technician Kell has been assigned the repair. Nadia kept her eyes on Yara. Do you feel safe putting your hand in there? Yara's filaments rose slightly. Severin saw it. So did Nadia. Yara lowered her voice. I understand the procedure. That wasn't what I asked. Silence settled around the machine, not true silence. Asterion never stopped humming, but the workers nearby had noticed. A Kalzuri foreman looked over. 2 Pelosian pipefitters slowed their cart. A crane operator turned one eye stalk toward them. Yara looked toward Oth, then toward Severin. Her stabilizing hands folded tightly against her abdomen. If I refuse an assigned maintenance procedure, it becomes a competence mark. Nadia's jaw tightened. What does that mean? Severin answered. Her professional record would show unwillingness to perform work within the accepted risk profile of her occupation. Which means it may affect advancement, pay, potentially, future assignments. Yes. Nadia looked at Yara again. So refusing dangerous work can damage her career. Oth stepped forward. Refusing work she is trained to perform. That is not the same sentence. It is here. Nadia nodded once. Okay. Then she stepped between Yara and the motor. Put the mark on me. Oth stared. You are not an employee. Great, then it shouldn't hurt my promotion. This is not amusing. No. Nadia looked toward the motor. It is. Severin moved closer. Engineer Mercer, you have no authority to stop this repair. I know. Then why are you interfering? Because the machine still has energy. The technician understands the risk. That doesn't make the risk disappear. She has performed this procedure 12 times. That doesn't make 13 safe. The probability of accidental restart is low. Nadia turned. How low? Oth answered, approximately 1 in 41,000 maintenance cycles. Nadia looked around the forge. How many maintenance cycles does this facility perform every year? Nobody answered immediately. Severin accessed the plant record. Approximately 92,000 involving energized or potentially energized machinery. Nadia nodded. So statistically, you should expect this kind of thing to happen. Oth's plates shifted. You are abusing probability. No, I'm taking it seriously. Yara remained beside the housing. Her filaments still stood. Nadia pointed toward the control interface. I want the machine de-energized. It is deactivated. No. She shook her head. I want energy physically isolated from the motor. I want the switch secured in the off position. I want the person working on the machine to possess the only key that can restore it. Oth stared. You intend to give a junior maintenance technician personal control over a production asset, while her hands are inside it. Yes. Absolutely. That could delay restart. Yes. If she leaves with the key. Then the machine stays off until somebody finds her. Oth's eyes narrowed. That is absurd. Nadia's voice remained calm. You think giving her the key is dangerous. It places production authority in the hands of a technician. I think giving everyone else the ability to restart a machine while she's inside it is dangerous. That stopped Oth for half a second. Severin asked, what is this procedure called? Nadia looked at him. Lockout/tagout. His translator rendered. Personal energy isolation with identified control ownership. Severin found the wording inelegant. What prevents the worker from forgetting to remove the lock? Procedure. What prevents the lock from failing? Testing. What prevents incorrect isolation? Verification. What prevents a worker from making an error during verification? Nadia looked directly at him. Nothing. Severin's posture straightened. Then your system still depends upon worker competence. Of course it does. Then what advantage does it provide? One mistake isn't enough. Severin paused. Nadia pointed at the machine. Right now, Yara forgets one light, gets distracted for 4 seconds, or assumes a fault won't clear, and this thing can eat her arm. Yara's filaments flattened. Nadia continued. I want the system designed so she has to be wrong several times before she gets hurt. Oth's voice hardened. You think workers should be protected from their own mistakes? Nadia looked at him. I think mistakes are part of being alive. Then she held out her hand toward the motor. And I think machines should be built accordingly. For the first time since the humans arrived, Asterion Orbital Forge stopped an entire production line because one maintenance technician refused to put her hand inside a motor. Officially, Yara had not refused. Nadia had done it for her. That distinction would matter later. At the time, Severin was concerned about something else. He had spent 32 years investigating industrial accidents. He had reviewed burned workers, crushed workers, asphyxiated workers. Workers exposed to radiation, vacuum, chemicals, falling cargo, electrical current, pressure failures, thermal events, machinery, and gravity. Every investigation began with the same question. Who had failed? Standing beside the silent motor, Severin heard Nadia Mercer ask something he had never written into a report. Why had failure been allowed to matter so much? Chapter 2. The Hierarchy of Controls. Nadia spent the next 4 days irritating everyone. Severin accompanied her because Asterion wanted certification for human trade contracts, and the human delegation had insisted upon an occupational safety review. Oth accompanied her because he did not trust Nadia alone with his workers. Yara accompanied her because Nadia asked. That surprised Severin. Why Technician Kell? She knows the plant. So does Director Verun. I want somebody who actually touches the machines. Oth's eyes narrowed. I have worked in this forge for 28 years. Nadia looked at his immaculate director's coat. When was the last time you crawled inside a coolant motor? Oth was silent for 2 seconds. 12 years. Yara. Yesterday. Nadia nodded. That's why. They began beneath the magnetic hull cranes. A partially completed freighter section floated overhead. It was 40 meters long. Mass. 1,850 tons. Workers crossed a marked lane beneath it. Nadia stopped. Why are people walking under suspended loads? Oth looked up. The lifting systems are redundant. That wasn't my question. The pedestrian route is clearly marked. Under the crane. Yes. Why? It is the most efficient path between fabrication sectors. Nadia looked toward Severin. What happens if the load falls? It should not. What happens if it does? Oth pointed toward the workers' helmets. Impact protection is mandatory. Nadia looked up at 1,800 tons of starship hull, then back at him. Those helmets rated for that. Yara made a small chirping sound. Severin realized it was laughter. Oth did not. The helmets protect against fragments and minor falling objects. Exactly. Nadia pointed toward a parallel maintenance corridor behind a storage wall. Move the walkway. Oth frowned. That adds 60 meters. Good. For every worker crossing sectors. Still good. That wastes thousands of labor hours annually. Nadia looked up again. Know what wastes more? Oth's lower arms folded. I assume you intend to tell me. Funerals. They moved on, chemical etching. Workers stood beside an open treatment bath containing an acidic vapor mixture used to prepare hull alloys. Every worker wore a full respirator. Oth indicated the equipment proudly. Triple filter breathing systems, continuous exposure monitors, emergency oxygen within 30 meters. Nadia inspected the bath. Why is it open? The process requires direct crane access. Can the bath be enclosed? With significant reconstruction. Can local exhaust capture the vapor before it reaches the worker? We already ventilate the room. That's not what I asked. Oth's plates tightened. Humans appear to enjoy asking the same question repeatedly. Usually because nobody answered it the first time. Severin watched the exchange. Engineer Mercer, you object to respirators. No. Yet workers possess protection. Yes. Then what is deficient? Nadia pointed toward the vapor curling above the bath. The hazard is still reaching them. The respirator prevents exposure. If it fits, it is fitted. If the seal stays good, it is inspected. If the cartridge works, it is tested. If the worker puts it on correctly, they are trained. Nadia nodded. That's 4 things that have to go right after we already decided to let toxic vapor hit the worker in the face. Severin's neck plates tightened. What would you prefer? That the vapor never reaches their face. They continued. Noise. Oth showed hearing protection. Nadia asked why the machines were not acoustically isolated. Falls. Oth showed harnesses. Nadia asked why the platform lacked guardrails. Hot surfaces. Oth showed gloves. Nadia asked why workers could reach the hot surfaces. By the 5th inspection, Severin had become irritated. You distrust workers. Nadia stopped. Wrong. You repeatedly assume workers will misuse equipment. No. You assume training will fail. Sometimes. You assume procedures will be forgotten. Yes. You assume errors. Yes. That is distrust. Nadia pointed toward a maintenance worker leaning over an open platform 40 meters above the fabrication deck. I trust him. Severin followed her hand. Then why object to his procedure? I distrust gravity. Severin looked at her. Nadia continued walking. He followed. You speak as if danger itself is an adversary. Not an adversary. Then what? Physics. They reached a quieter observation balcony. Below them, molten metal flowed in bright orange lines behind ceramic shielding. Nadia leaned against the railing. Humans use something called the hierarchy of controls. Severin accessed his recorder. Explain. Best option, eliminate the hazard. Oth made a dismissive noise. And when elimination is impossible, substitute something less dangerous. And when that is impossible, engineer the hazard away from people. Then, administrative controls, procedures, training, scheduling. And protective equipment. Last. Severin's head lifted. Last. Last line. Oth stepped closer. That is irrational. Why? Protective equipment directly protects the worker. Only while everything about the equipment and the worker goes right. Nadia counted on her fingers. Your order is basically warn, train, protect, compensate, investigate. Severin said, that is an oversimplification. Is it wrong? He did not answer. Nadia looked across the forge. Our order starts earlier. Eliminate. Yes. Substitute. Yes. Engineer. Yes. Then procedures. Yes. And equipment. Yes. Severin considered. You design the environment before modifying worker behavior. Now you're getting it. What do you call the entire philosophy? Safety. Oth looked unconvinced. Protective equipment is safety. It's part of safety. Then define the whole. Nadia looked down through the observation glass. Thousands of workers moved between machines capable of killing them in different ways, making sure one bad moment doesn't become somebody's last. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Yara asked, do human workers still die? Nadia looked at her. Yes. Even with these systems? Yes. Then they fail. Oth's eyes sharpened as if Yara had won something. Nadia merely nodded. Sometimes. Yara's sensory filaments lifted. Then why are you certain this is better? Nadia looked toward the molten metal lines below, because perfection isn't the standard. What is? Fewer funerals. Chapter 3. The Perfect Worker. Severin brought Nadia 819 accident files. That was a mistake. He realized it approximately 40 minutes later. She sat at a conference table in the administrative tower with holographic reports stacked around her. The tower overlooked Asterion's central manufacturing spine. Ships moved through the docking bays beyond the glass. Inside, Nadia was becoming progressively angrier. Severin stood opposite her. Oth sat nearby. Hesh Talavar occupied the moisture station at the end of the table. Hesh was Asterion. His actual body was pale blue and nearly boneless, evolved from tidal shallows where structural support came from water rather than skeleton. Off-world, Asterion lived inside upright exoskeletal moisture frames. Hesh's translucent chest reservoir circulated saline mist over delicate respiratory membranes while mechanical limbs carried him. He represented industrial compensation claims. Traditionally, his work began after someone had already been injured. He was fascinated by Nadia. File 93, she said. Severin accessed it. Foundry worker, traumatic amputation. Cause: worker disabled an interlock guard. Why? He attempted to clear a jam while the press remained energized. Why? Severin paused. The report does not specify. Nadia looked up. That's what I thought. She opened another. File 148. Chemical exposure. Cause: worker failed to complete full decontamination sequence before removing protective garment. Why? Procedure deviation. Why did they deviate? Severin's neck plates shifted. It is not recorded. Another, file 211. Loading collision, 1 fatality. Cause: crane operator skipped the final position checklist. Why? Operator error. Why did they skip it? Unknown. Nadia leaned back. You use that phrase a lot. Which? Operator error. It is a valid cause classification. No. Severin's head lifted. It identifies the immediate causal action. That isn't the same as cause. It is precisely the same. Nadia opened file 93 again. The worker bypassed the guard. Yes. Why? Carelessness. Was the line behind schedule? Oth looked toward the report. Severin searched. Yes. Were production bonuses tied to output? Yes. Was a stoppage charged against the team? Oth answered. Yes. Was clearing the jam with the guard enabled slower? Severin found the maintenance notes. By approximately 12 minutes. Nadia looked at him. So the worker had 2 choices. Follow the procedure and hurt the team's production numbers, or bypass the guard and get the line running faster. Nobody instructed him to bypass it. Nadia's expression hardened. You don't have to tell people to do something. She pointed at the report. Sometimes you just make every other choice expensive. Hesh's mechanical fingers tapped softly against the table. Oth spoke. Workers remain responsible for choosing correctly. Yes. Nadia nodded. And management is responsible for the choices the system encourages. You transfer blame upward. I spread responsibility where it belongs. Severin gestured toward the stack. These workers received extensive training. People do dumb things when they're rushed. They should not. People get tired. They should request relief. People forget. They should use checklists. People get distracted. They should maintain attention. Nadia stared at him. Severin continued. A competent worker follows procedure. Nadia was silent for several seconds. Then, how many accidents have you investigated? 819. How many times did the injured or deceased worker make the last mistake? Severin accessed the database. He knew the number would be high. He did not expect it to feel like an accusation. 612. And how many of those reports stopped there? He searched longer this time. 584. Nadia looked at him. Why? Because the responsible deviation had been identified. No. Her voice was softer now. That's where the investigation got tired. Oth stood, that is insulting. I mean the system. You are describing generations of professional standards as laziness. I'm describing a culture that finds the person closest to the injury and calls the problem solved. Severin's vibration sensors detected Oth shifting his weight. Irritation. Hesh's moisture pumps accelerated. Interest. Nadia opened another file. A worker had fallen from a service ladder. Cause. Improper equipment selection. The correct platform was stored 70 meters away, Nadia said. Severin looked at the report. Yes. Locked. For equipment control. Supervisor had the access code. Yes. Supervisor was in another sector. Yes. So the worker used the ladder. Improperly. Predictably. Severin disliked the word. You believe all misconduct is inevitable. No. I believe systems create patterns. She looked around the table. If a worker does something stupid once, maybe it's the worker. She tapped the files. If 50 workers do different versions of the same stupid thing, maybe the workplace is teaching them something. Silence. Hesh spoke. What would a human investigation ask? Nadia turned toward him. Why was the mistake possible? He waited. Why was it easy? Another finger. Why did one mistake reach the worker? Another. What barrier should have stopped it? Another. What pressure encouraged the shortcut? Another. What warning did we ignore before somebody got hurt? Severin frowned. Before the accident. Near misses. Hesh's body shifted inside the saline mist. Define. Something goes wrong and nobody gets hurt. Severin stared. That is not an accident. Correct. Then why investigate it? Nadia looked at him. Because they're cheaper. Cheaper than what? The ones that do. She opened a human industrial database. Reports appeared. A forklift backing incident with no collision. A dropped tool that missed a worker. A pressure spike contained by an emergency valve. A chemical spill caught inside secondary containment. A worker nearly entering energized equipment. Thousands. Severin stared. You document events in which no loss occurred. Especially those. Why? Because luck is data. Severin's throat muscles tightened. Nadia continued. If a crane load swings and misses somebody's head by 10 centimeters, you can write no injury and move on. She looked toward the forge beyond the glass. Or you can realize the universe just gave you the accident report before the funeral. Hesh's mechanical frame went very still. My profession begins after injury. Nadia looked toward him, then move it earlier. Chapter 4. Stop work. Asterion accepted the human safety trial for one reason. Money. Earth shipping consortiums represented 23% of the Forge's projected expansion contracts. Without human certification, those contracts would go elsewhere. Director Oth Verun therefore permitted what he privately described as temporary procedural contamination. Nadia framed the phrase and hung it in her office. The most controversial change appeared on every worker terminal. Stop work authority. Any worker who reasonably believed an uncontrolled serious hazard existed could halt the job. No prior supervisory authorization required. No disciplinary retaliation permitted for a good faith stop. Oth read the policy 3 times, then called Nadia. You have given junior technicians authority to halt an orbital forge. Yes. Any technician. Yes. Any worker. Yes. What if they are wrong? Then we check. That costs money. Less than funerals. What if they misuse it? Then we deal with misuse. What if they panic? We train them. You just spent weeks telling me training is insufficient. It is insufficient by itself. Oth's upper hands tightened. You always have another layer. That's kind of the idea. Workers did not trust the policy. For the first 12 days, nobody used it, not once. Yara explained why. They believe management is recording who presses the control. Management is. Yara stared at Nadia. For retaliation. For tracking hazards. That distinction will not comfort them. Nadia looked toward Oth. Oth folded all four arms. I have publicly prohibited retaliation. Yara's filaments rose. With respect, Director, you also publicly maintained competence marks. Oth's eyes narrowed. Nadia smiled. Kid S got a point. She is not a child. Still has a point. The first stop came on day 13. Yara was beneath hull crane 7. The crane moved a 6,000-ton dreadnought spine through the central fabrication hall. The structure floated 30 meters above the floor. 8 magnetic load compensators maintained alignment. The computer showed all 8 within tolerance. Yara's skin said otherwise. Her black sensory filaments began lifting along both forearms. She stopped, looked up. The compensators hummed through the deck. Steady, almost. She felt it again, a tiny irregularity every 9th cycle. She checked her handheld meter. Normal, again, tiny, not enough for an alarm. Her supervisor, a broad-bodied Maloran named Tesh Orin, approached. Problem. Compensator 6. He checked the display. Within tolerance. I know. Then what? I feel a fluctuation. How large? Less than 1%. Tesh looked up at the 6,000-ton hull spine, then toward the line schedule. They were 5 hours behind. Monitor it. Yara did. Another fluctuation, then normal. Her filaments flattened. Rose, flat. She remembered the motor. Nadia standing between her and the housing. Put the mark on me. She remembered another sentence. If your safety plan requires everyone to be perfect, you don't have a safety plan. Yara looked toward the emergency stop. Her hand moved halfway. Stop. The entire forge could lose hours, hundreds of workers, magnetic realignment, thermal sequencing, production delays. She imagined the competence mark, then remembered there was not supposed to be one. Not anymore. Her hand hit the control. Alarm sounded. The crane stopped. Across Asterion, hull line 7 went dark. Workers looked up. 6,000 tons of starship structure hung motionless overhead. Director Oth Veyrun arrived 11 minutes later. Yara had never seen him move that fast. He approached with all 4 hands clenched. Who stopped the line? Yara stepped forward. I did. Why? Load compensator 6 fluctuated. Oth checked the diagnostic. System reports normal. Yes. Magnitude. Below alarm threshold. Then why did you stop my forge? Yara's stabilizing arms folded tightly against her body. I believed the load was unstable. Based on my sensory response. Oth looked at Nadia. Nadia was standing near the crane base. She said nothing. That irritated him more. Inspect it, Oth ordered. Engineers ran diagnostics. Normal, they tested field output. Normal temperature, normal alignment, normal. After 40 minutes, Oth's posture hardened. Technician Kell. Yara looked down. Nadia interrupted. Open the housing. The chief crane engineer frowned. Diagnostic results show no internal fault. Then opening it should be boring. Oth looked at her. Do it. They lowered the crane head into service position, de-energized it, physically isolated the supply, locked the isolation. Nadia noticed that, said nothing. Technicians opened the superconductive junction housing. Yara's filaments rose before the panel came all the way off. There. The crack was nearly invisible. A hairline fracture ran through the inner junction collar. Under load, thermal expansion widened it by fractions of a millimeter. The magnetic field destabilized, then recovered. Again, until eventually it would not. The chief engineer stared. How long? Impossible to know. Estimate. The engineer swallowed. 5 cycles, 50, maybe less. They all looked up, at the 6,000-ton hull section, at the occupied fabrication floor beneath it. Nobody spoke. Yara looked at Oth, waiting. Her entire body had gone rigid. Oth looked toward the cracked junction, then toward her. You stopped production without authorization. Yara lowered her head. Yes, Director. Oth paused then. Good. Yara looked up. Oth turned toward the gathered workers. Replace the assembly. Inspect all compensators of this model. Hull line 7 remains closed until complete. The chief engineer said. That could take 11 hours. Oth looked at him. Yes. No argument, no hesitation. Then Oth turned back toward the floor. Why did only one of you notice? Nadia's voice came from behind him. Wrong question. Oth slowly turned. She walked toward the group. How many people noticed something odd and didn't think it was enough to stop the job? Silence, then one crane operator raised a hand. I logged a minor phase jitter yesterday. Another worker raised one. I heard a harmonic shift. A Pelosian technician lifted 2 manipulators. Compensator 6 required recalibration twice last month. Another. The housing ran 3 degrees warmer during the last heavy lift. Oth stared 4 workers, then 5, then 7 weak signals, separate, small, none sufficient alone, together obvious. Nadia looked at Oth. That's your accident report. He looked toward the crane. Nobody was injured. Exactly. Chapter 5. The accident without a victim. Severin received the report the next morning. Asterion Incident 4409. Potential catastrophic load failure. Casualties, 0. He read it twice, then summoned Nadia. She entered carrying coffee. You filed an accident with no accident. Yep. No equipment failed. The junction cracked. The crane did not lose the load. Because Yara stopped it. No worker was harmed. Best part. Severin placed both manipulator hands on the desk. Then this belongs in maintenance records. No. Why not? Because maintenance records fix components. She tapped the report. This fixes decisions. Severin's skin tightened along his shoulders. You continue to classify non-events as events. Nadia took a drink. Absence of injury doesn't prove presence of safety. He stared. She continued. That crane had been warning you for weeks. The signs were individually below alarm thresholds. Exactly. Then how could the workers know? They couldn't. Not individually. Nadia set down the coffee. That's why you collect near misses. Severin opened the worker reports. Field jitter, heat increase, recalibration, harmonic noise, sensory fluctuation. Different people had observed different pieces. No mechanism had joined them. The information existed, Severin said. Yep. But the system did not. Yep. He disliked when she answered like that. A knock sounded. Hesh Talavar entered in his moisture frame. He carried a data tablet. I have 742 reports. Severin looked toward him. Compensation claims. No. What injuries? None. Severin closed his eyes. Nadia smiled. Hesh placed the tablet on the desk. After the crane incident, he had opened an anonymous worker hazard channel. The results arrived in less than a day. Improvised tools, emergency shutoffs blocked by stored material, damaged guards, heat alarms routinely ignored, protective equipment difficult to obtain on night shift, chemical containers stored beside incompatible compounds. Maintenance ladders missing anti-slip feet, supervisors rewarding teams that skipped cooldown intervals. A ventilation alarm workers had silenced because it triggered too often. Severin scrolled. The list continued. Oth entered before he reached the end. What is this? Hesh turned the tablet. Worker hazard reports. Oth read the count. His plates darkened. 742. In 21 hours. This is catastrophic. Nadia shook her head. No. Oth looked at her. There are 742 safety complaints. Exactly. How is that good? Yesterday you had 742 hazards and didn't know about them. Oth stopped. Nadia leaned against Severin's desk. Today you know where to start. He looked again at the list. The anger shifted, not gone, redirected. How many require immediate shutdown? Hesh answered. 23 appear serious enough for review. Appear. I am a compensation specialist. Oth looked toward Nadia. She held up her hands. Not me. Why? You need your own people to learn this. Oth stared. You have spent weeks inserting yourself into my operations. And now I'm telling you to own it. The Kalzari director looked toward Severin. Can your office classify them? Severin almost answered automatically. His office handled losses. Damage, injury, compensation, responsibility. 742 hazards without casualties technically fell outside his mandate. He looked at the crane incident report. Casualties, 0. Something shifted. Yes, Severin said, Oth's eyes narrowed, that quickly. No. Then why say yes? Severin looked at Nadia. She smiled faintly. He ignored her. Because my office begins too late. Hesh's moisture pump slowed. Severin opened one of his old reports. Cause worker error. Another responsible party technician. Another. Compensation classification, fatal industrial negligence. He had been exceptionally good at arriving after blood. He had measured loss, assigned fault, calculated payment. Authorized restart. He had never considered that perhaps the most valuable industrial loss assessor was the one who assessed the loss before it existed. Oth touched the hazard list. What do we do first? Nadia answered, find the things that can kill the most people fastest. That is your method. That's triage. Then, control the energy. Then, listen to the workers. Oth looked toward the 742 reports. For how long? Nadia picked up her coffee. Forever. Chapter 6. The day nobody died. 5 months later, Forge Sector 9 exploded. There was no poetic warning, no ominous silence, no worker with a bad feeling. At 14:07:11, a plasma heating conduit ruptured inside the heavy alloy forming line. A manufacturing defect in an internal liner, invisible during inspection, propagated under repeated thermal cycling. The crack opened. Superheated plasma escaped. The conduit failed catastrophically. The first blast destroyed 3 machines. The second tore through a maintenance bridge. The temperature inside the bay exceeded survivable levels in less than 2 seconds. Asterion reacted, not perfectly, that mattered. The automatic isolation gate detected pressure loss and began closing. One gate jammed halfway. The secondary thermal barrier deployed. A heat sensor failed. A redundant sensor 30 meters away detected the spike. The central system killed power to Sector 9. A worker on the upper fabrication level chose the wrong evacuation corridor. A newly installed interlock refused to open the door toward the fire and illuminated the alternate route. 2 technicians hesitated because the shutdown order had not come through their supervisor. Yarakel hit the local emergency isolation. She did not ask permission. A plasma valve snapped shut. The surge redirected. A containment wall cracked, held, barely. In the control center, every alarm on Oth Verun's display turned red. Production managers began shouting. Sector 9 offline. Pressure unstable. Primary line lost. Hull 4 thermal sequence interrupted. Emergency shutdown will ruin the casting. Oth looked toward the casting monitor. The alloy section inside Forge 9 represented 43 days of work, enough material to build the central spine of a cruiser. Someone said, "We can save the line if we restore feed within 90 seconds." Old Oth might have tried. The new Oth looked at the personnel count. Forget the line. The production manager stared. Director, count people. Sir, if we lose thermal consistency. I said count people. The room changed. Hesh Talavar stood at the emergency accountability station. His mechanical hands moved across personnel records. Sector 9 shift complement, 412. Evacuation beacons updated. Workers crossed checkpoints, 300, 350, 390, 406. Oth stared. 6 missing. Nadia stood beside him. She did not say anything. 408. 409. A video feed showed 2 workers entering a refuge compartment as heat rolled through the corridor. 411. 1 remaining, Hesh said, Yara's identifier. Oth turned toward the maintenance cameras. The feed flickered. Found her. She was beside the emergency isolation station, helping a limping Maloran worker through the secondary bulkhead. Move, Oth whispered. They crossed. The bulkhead closed. 412, Hesh exhaled. All accounted. The room stayed silent. Then reports began arriving. Injuries, burns, smoke inhalation, 1 fractured leg, several cases of thermal exposure, no fatalities. Oth sat down. He did not remember deciding to. The forge continued shaking around them. 3 manufacturing bays had been destroyed. A plasma line had collapsed. The cruiser casting was ruined. Projected losses climbed into numbers large enough to interest governments. 17 workers were transported to medical. None critical. Fatalities. 0. Severin arrived 11 minutes later. He stood in the control center doorway, felt the vibration beneath his feet. Asterion's song was wrong. Entire sectors were silent. Others hummed under emergency power. He looked at the damage display. Casualties. Hesh turned, 17 injured. Fatal. 0. Severin stared. That cannot be correct. Hesh's aquatic body shifted inside the mist. I checked twice. Severin looked toward the thermal model. The release had been worse than several accidents in his archive that killed dozens. He turned toward Nadia. How? She looked exhausted. Layers. He waited. The conduit failed. Yes. Automatic isolation worked. One gate jammed, so the secondary barrier held. A sensor failed. Another caught it. A worker took the wrong route. The door stopped them. 2 technicians waited for authorization. Yara didn't. Severin looked toward the display. You expected these failures. Not those exact ones. Then how? We expected something to fail. He stared. Nadia continued. No barrier is perfect. You design assuming your safeguards will fail. Some of them. You design assuming workers will make mistakes. Yes. Supervisors will hesitate. Yes. Equipment will malfunction. Yes. Then your entire system assumes incompetence. Nadia looked at him. No. Outside the control center windows, emergency crews moved across the damaged forge. Her voice softened. We design around being alive. Severin said nothing. People get tired, parts crack, sensors die, procedures get misunderstood. Somebody panics, somebody makes the wrong call. She gestured toward the damage map. Safety means none of those gets to be the only thing standing between a worker and death. Severin looked toward Oth. The director still sat at the main console. His forge had lost billions, 3 bays destroyed, a major contract delayed. 412 workers had entered Sector 9 that morning. 412 were still alive. Oth looked up. I would like the incident investigation opened immediately. Severin nodded. Responsible party. Oth stared at him, then looked toward Nadia. For the first time, Severin understood how wrong his own question sounded. He corrected himself. Hazard sequence. Oth's posture changed, slightly. Begin with the conduit. Severin opened a new report. For 32 years, every serious investigation he had written began with cause of incident, responsible party, compensation classification. His fingers hovered. Then he deleted the template, he wrote. Hazard identified after containment failure. Then, defenses that held, then. Defenses that failed, then. Why one failure did not become 412 deaths, Nadia read over his shoulder. That last heading is a little dramatic. Severin looked at her. You are criticizing me for drama. Fair. He saved the report. Chapter 7. The report. The conquered industrial assembly expected Director Oth Verun to oppose the Human Safety Accords. He had opposed nearly every preliminary proposal. He had called stop-work authority economically reckless. He had described mandatory physical energy isolation as administrative vandalism. He had accused Nadia Mercer of trying to engineer risk out of a profession whose purpose involved manipulating molten starship alloys in vacuum. The industrial delegates therefore looked satisfied when Oth entered the chamber. Nadia sat in the observer gallery. Yara sat beside her. Hesh occupied a moisture station near the worker delegation. Severin stood at the central testimony platform. The new report waited behind him. Asterion Sector 9 event. Fatalities, 0. A delegate from the Manufacturing Guild spoke first. Assessor call, you recommend granting workers unilateral authority to halt production. Under defined hazardous conditions. Without supervisory approval. Yes. Do you understand what that can cost? Yes. How? Severin looked toward Oth. Director. Oth approached the testimony platform. The delegate leaned forward. Director Verun, a junior technician stopped your hull line 7 under this experimental authority. Yes. How long? 11 hours. And the cost? Oth named a figure. Murmuring spread through the chamber. The delegate looked satisfied. That is precisely our concern. Oth's 4 hands settled against the platform. The component technician Kell identified. would eventually have dropped a 6,000-ton hull section onto an occupied fabrication floor. Silence, the delegate shifted, but it had not yet failed. No. So the predicted casualty figure is speculative. Of course. Oth looked around the chamber. So is every disaster before it happens. No one answered. He continued. I oppose the stopwork rule. Nadia smiled faintly in the gallery. Oth ignored her. I believed production authority belonged to management, because management possessed the complete operational picture. He looked toward Yara. I was wrong. Yara's filaments lifted. A junior technician stopped my forge. She cost us 11 hours of production. Oth paused. I no longer care how expensive 11 hours are. The chamber became very still. Another delegate spoke. You cannot operate heavy industry by eliminating all risk. Nadia whispered. Here it comes. Severin looked toward the delegate. No one has proposed eliminating all risk. Then what is the purpose? Preventing one foreseeable failure from becoming fatal. The delegate frowned. That sounds human. Severin considered. It did to me once. A few humans laughed. He activated the Sector 9 incident model. The plasma conduit rupture filled the chamber in light. The primary component failed. One layer disappeared. The automatic gate partially failed. Another, a sensor failed. Another, a worker chose an incorrect evacuation route. Another, 2 workers hesitated. Another, each failure appeared in red. Then the surviving layers appeared. Secondary containment, redundant detection, interlocked doors, local stop authority, refuge compartments, emergency training, personnel accountability. Severin looked toward the assembly. The old method asks which failure caused the accident. He paused. The new method asks why every other safeguard did not stop it. Hesch's frame shifted. A worker representative asked, What about compensation systems? Hesch answered from his station. I spent 27 years representing injured workers. His mechanical hands rested beside the mist reservoir. I believed my duty began when a worker was harmed. He looked toward Nadia. I have changed my opinion. The representative waited. My duty begins when the worker notices something that might harm them. That line traveled farther than any regulation. Within 6 months, 7 conquered member civilizations adopted stopwork protections. Within a year, 23 adopted formal near-miss reporting. 2 industrial guilds attempted to ban anonymous hazard channels. Their workers stopped production until they reconsidered. Humans found that funny. The guilds did not. The final Concord standard did not copy Earth law. Nadia insisted on that. Different species had different risks. Vesari could sense fields humans could not. Asterion required hydration protections irrelevant to causalry. Threnody vibration sensitivity created opportunities and hazards no human body could perceive. Some species worked safely in temperatures that would kill humans. Others could not tolerate atmospheric compounds humans barely noticed. Occupational safety could not mean designing every workplace for one species. It meant designing each workplace for the workers actually inside it. The Concord standard therefore established principles instead of a single human rulebook. Serious energy sources had to be isolatable. Workers could stop work for credible hazards without retaliation. Near misses could be investigated before they became casualties. System causes had to be considered alongside individual errors. Engineering controls took priority where feasible. Production incentives could not formally reward known unsafe shortcuts, and no serious incident report was considered complete merely because someone had found the person who made the last mistake. Severin supported every provision. That surprised him most. Chapter 8. The Museum of Mistakes. 15 years later, Asterion Orbital Forge opened a museum. This embarrassed Oth Verun. It is not a museum. Nadia Mercer looked up at the sign. Asterion Center for Industrial Learning and Incident Prevention. Looks like a museum. It is a training archive. Still a museum. It is operational. You put artifacts behind glass. For instruction. There's a gift shop. Oth's plates darkened. That was not my decision. Nadia smiled. Age had softened her face. Gray now dominated her hair. She had stopped crawling under machinery herself after one knee finally objected to 30 years of negotiation with metal floors. She remained professionally incapable of walking past an unsecured ladder without commenting on it. Severin joined them at the entrance. His mineralized scales had become cloudier with age. The rainbow refractions along their edges were softer. His stride was slower. His vibration sense remained excellent. Director. Oth turned. I retired 9 years ago. Nadia looked at him. You still answer to director. That is because everyone here lacks discipline. Or because you keep coming back. Oth ignored her. The center occupied a former fabrication annex. Its exhibits contained no heroic statues, no portraits of brave workers entering fire, no memorial walls. Instead, it displayed failures, a cracked pressure valve, a warped safety guard, a chemical hose that had softened under the wrong solvent, a scorched respirator, a bent railing, a lockout device cut open during an emergency investigation, a corroded electrical connector, and in the central gallery a fractured superconductive junction collar, Yara's crane component. A group of engineering students stood around it, young species from across the Concord. A Vesari student pressed both hands to the display glass. The label read, Asterion Incident 4409. Magnetic load compensator fracture. Stop work initiated by technician, YARAQEL. Casualties, 0. One student raised a manipulator. Assessor call. Severin looked over. The student was a young Threnody. His crystal-edged scales still clear. Yes. Why is this classified as an incident? Severin approached. The student gestured toward the plaque. No one was injured. No. The load did not fall. No. Then nothing happened. Severin looked through the glass at the crack. Tiny, almost invisible. 15 years earlier it had been small enough to argue about. He remembered Yara shaking beneath the crane. Oth asking why she had stopped his forge. Nadia asking a better question. How many deaths would make it an incident? Severin asked. The student hesitated. 1. Why wait? The student stared. Severin touched the glass. 0 was the achievement. The group became quiet. Nadia stood behind them. She did not smile. Some lines deserved to remain alone. They continued through the exhibit. Near the far wall, Severin stopped. One old data tablet sat in its own case. He recognized it before reading the label. His report, 31 years old. A maintenance technician had lost 2 limbs after a hydraulic press restarted during service. Cause worker error. The same phrase dominated the display. Nadia came beside him. You put that here. Yes. You could remove it. No. Why? Severin looked at his own old conclusion. The technician had failed to watch the restart indicator. The machine could restart while occupied. The supervisor could restore power remotely. The worker had been blamed. Years later, Nadia Mercer had stood in front of another motor and refused to let Yara Kell place her hand inside. Same hazard, different ending. It should remain. Nadia looked toward him, so they know what we used to think safety meant. Behind them, students moved through the museum. They inspected broken components, asked questions, argued about controls. One pointed toward a photograph of the Sector 9 plasma rupture. The caption beneath it read, 3 fabrication bays lost. 17 injuries. 0 fatalities. No medal, no hero, no glorious sacrifice, only layers that had worked, and failures that had been learned from. Severin looked toward Nadia. You once said humans distrust gravity. We do. Pressure. Absolutely. Voltage. Yes. Heat. Very much. Machinery. Depends who built it. You distrust almost everything. Nadia considered, not workers. Severin looked at the old tablet. No. That had taken him 32 years to understand. The galaxy had always understood dangerous work. It had miners, foundry crews, reactor technicians, orbital builders, deep space mechanics. Workers entered dangerous places every day. The galaxy trained them. Warned them, armored them, paid them more, and when one of them died, it asked, what mistake did the worker make? Humanity asked another question. Why was one mistake enough to kill them? That was the difference. Humans did not invent helmets, harnesses, emergency medicine, warning signs. Other civilizations had versions of all of them. What humanity brought was the expectation that danger itself could be engineered backward. Remove it when possible, separate the worker from it when not. Build barriers. Build redundancies. Assume equipment will fail. Assume instructions will be misunderstood. Assume someone will be tired. Assume someone will be rushed. Assume somebody eventually will have one perfectly ordinary bad moment. Then make sure that moment does not become a funeral. The galaxy once considered this distrust. Eventually, it understood. Humans did not distrust workers. They distrusted gravity, pressure, heat, voltage, momentum, chemistry, stored energy. And every machine that did not care how experienced the person standing beside it was. That was why the greatest occupational safety reports eventually became the strangest documents in the human archive. No heroic last stands, no medals, no names carved into memorials, just hazard identified, system stopped, correction completed, casualties, 0, and after enough years the galaxy finally understood what humans had been trying to teach it from the beginning. The best workplace accident was the one nobody ever had to survive.